Thanks everyone for joining us. Very excited to be here at the Givesley Hub at the most air-conditioned space on the Quas set. It's the draws, spread the good word for sure. So thank you, Chad and the team, for facilitating this great conversation. I'm super excited personally to have this one because we're going to talk about brand values and the importance of brand values, but more specifically, how we are actually seeing them influence real consumer behavior, loyalty, purchase, and how it's helping brands really rethink how they engage with their audience and their consumers and market to them. So it's going to be a great conversation. I'll let us get started with a few intros. We have a great esteemed panel group here. So Chad, maybe if you'd like to kick it off and we go this way.
Okay. Chad Hickey, I'm the CEO of Givesley, and you're welcome for the air conditioning.
Thank you. Shay Kelly, I think Chief Client Officer is my title for this, but I'm actually President, Mediahub, and based in Boston. Good to see you all.
David Lai, I'm the President of Data and Analytics Transformation at Publicis Collective.
Ajit Shivadasan, I'm the web guy at Lenovo.
It's the most important job at Lenovo, I'm sure. So to start us off, we know we're going to start this conversation really just discussing brand values, and it can mean so many different things. I think some people have certain perceptions of what brand values really are, but they can really run the gamut from just something that you're very specific about when it comes to your brand and what you stand for, as well as things that are more altruistic or causes that you really care about the brand aligning itself with. So thought it would be helpful to start us off just kind of explaining what you view as brand values for either your brand or for your clients or partners.
All right.
Start us off.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the essence of marketing. It's the essence of everything that we do as brands is to try and connect with audiences in an authentic way on things that matters to them. But I think more and more, last maybe 10 years or 15 years, we have kind of gotten away from that. I think we have gotten more into performance marketing and other things which have kind of really diluted the brand value proposition. So people kind of do this high-level thing where they talk about who they are and all this other stuff. But the mid-funnel journey of connecting with customers' passion points on what's important to them, I think we've forgotten a little bit of that in the transactions that we've seen. So most of the brands, I think, are now rediscovering that that's a very important part of driving consideration. And quite frankly, every conversation that I've had, and I've had many so far yesterday and some part today, has been about trying to say, hey, how do you actually identify what is important for your customers, and how do you actually connect that brand promise that you have with what is important to your clients so that you actually have a meaningful conversation of whatever that they want to do with you as a brand.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and we're definitely going to talk a lot more about kind of bridging that consumer journey. So David, Shay, from your point of view, how do you think about this from a client perspective?
I think for us it's about the partnership. We're grateful to work with many brands. Some are over 100 years old, some are less than 5 years old. And at Collective, we're about connecting to outcomes. And so if we want to drive the best outcomes for our clients, how we work not only from a media perspective, but also creative, content, and ultimately driving business transformation, thinking through those brand values and helping our clients make differentiated decisions is a key part of how you drive better outcomes.
Brand to me is the net takeaway, the sum of a consumer's impression of the company, the product, what you do. Advertising is a part of that, but it's every experience you have with the brand, whether it's at point of purchase, every product uses for good or bad is your net impression of the brand. So in our marketing campaigns, we have focused a lot on making sure that that's coming through and that the essence of that is always apparent. And I think we're going to talk about the value of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's your DNA, right? It doesn't change. It's always with you. I think about personal values the same way I think about brand values. We'll have conversations all the time with people that are like, well, let us think about that. And it's like, you don't really know like what you stand for, in some cases, or we see that people default to more of the controversial values. They automatically think controversial. Not to me, but if you're from the U.S., you get what I mean. But like DEI and sustainability, I feel like that's where people default when really, we'll work with a CPG brand that's healthy eating, and they're like, that's our values. And so I think for us, it's like getting people to realize that it never goes away. It's a part of your DNA. That doesn't mean it may not evolve, but no matter what leadership is saying, you have to stay true to that, because I think when you see that backlash happen, it's when the consumer feels very betrayed by what you have said and now what you are doing. So.
I couldn't agree more. And I think what you are saying is really interesting, because we know that consumers are becoming more and more savvy about how brands identify themselves, how they market themselves, and they actually increasingly make purchase decisions accordingly. So Chad, you're the expert here. I know Givesley has done some good research recently around the topic of how being very clear about brand values, like you said, something as simple as everyday low prices, just being really clear about what you stand for can really influence things that are traditionally seen as even a performance media KPI.
Yeah, and I think that, for values, social impact, social responsibility, whatever you want to call it, I think that we're all in this moment of kind of either evolving the language, softening the language, whatever that may be for whatever reason. But I think that, I really think about this moment very similar to like 2000 with the internet. Internet came out, .com burst happened. The internet didn't go away. It evolved into what it needed to be. You know what I mean? And I think that from our perspective, we think brands need to relook at the way they talk about cause, the way they talk about their values. We found in the research that we did with Global Web Index that 60% of consumers across the board want brands to talk about their values in their products, so that then influences their purchase decisions. So I think for us, what we are very, aggressive at evangelizing is saying like, look, this is a consumer behavior. Yes, we've done the fluffy cause marketing campaigns, and it's not that those are necessarily bad, but if you talk to a CMO, whether they'll publicly admit this or not, they'll say, hey, it's the first thing to get cut because we've never really tied ROI to it. Our CEO thinks it's fluffy. And it's like, well, maybe it is fluffy. Like maybe you need to be thinking about, if you're a CPG brand, like how you talk about food insecurity and the work that you do, so that then people feel that accountability to go to the shelf and actually buy your product. Now, that's not to say that values is always going to be the primary signal though, either. Like, price, convenience definitely comes into play, but I think at those moments where you're selecting between two similar things, it can really be the thing that tips the consumer over to selecting your brand.
And I think from the consumer perspective, to the rest of our panelists, how are you thinking about this changing consumer journey? We know that it's no longer linear. The way that consumers choose to make purchases doesn't really go from discovery to consideration to purchase so clearly. And like Chad was just saying, things like brand values and aligning with them really do influence purchase decisions. So what are some ways that you're kind of rethinking, media strategy and how you engage with consumers in a world where that much transformation is happening?
I mean, it's nothing revolutionary or new. I mean, this is marketing, really. I mean, this is what was supposed to be. Like when Philip Kotler wrote his marketing book, I mean, that's what he was thinking, is that, you align your kind of brand values and your message to the audience and kind of create a connection. But I think somewhere along the way, I think we lost our way, at least in the last 10, 15 years, because we've been chasing productivity and other metrics in favor of kind of telling the story. Now, what is really pivotal that has happened was COVID. And I think the biggest impact that I've seen personally is the Gen Z audience. This audience is very clear in saying explicitly that we will not support a brand unless you identify with us. And so I'll give you an example. Now, this is not a Gen Z example, but we have a partnership with Formula One. Our stated brand tagline is smarter technology for all. 75% of F1 customers or patrons are focused on tech. So here's an audience that's clearly focused on tech. They understand how that influences them. It aligns with what we are trying to do, which is innovation. How do you kind of connect the two and then have the right conversations at the right moment? And then if you go back and look at the metrics, in a year, 2 years' time, what we've seen is our brand scores with that audience went up 17%, which is huge. I mean, you can imagine a preference going up by 17% is not a small thing. But the fact that you identify that audience and that tech is important for them, innovation is important for them, and then F1 really, I mean, F1 as an example, at any given event creates 500 terabytes of data. So, I mean, it's a very tech-heavy type of environment. And so for us to be there and to identify and convince these people that we are innovative means we are translating that into an audience that then kind of talks about it, right? So to me, it's just going back to the basics of kind of saying, what is it that you stand for and what does your customer consider value and how do you connect the two things? So I find that it's very basic, but a lot of people just get away from it. They don't do it well.
I like what you said about us kind of losing our way at some point over the last 10 to 15 years. And I think that reflects that we're coming full circle and the focus really being on that human connection with the consumer. How do you both think about that?
I read, not recently, but as an industry, we all chased ad tech down the funnel. And it was cool. And as an industry, it was like, oh, I finally got my person. You know, I know where they are. But the two problems are, one, we forgot time and place. Okay, those matter a lot. And I think we're getting better now, thankfully, because of more ad tech that's helping us with that. But at the top of the funnel, if you think about the brand piece, we also forgot that, right? Because it wasn't so easily measurable. And I know you have great research. You're helping us every day prove the efficacy of that work. But the CMO of Chipotle we work with, and they are so committed to brand. And he just put it simply, he's like, listen, just because brand can't be measured doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means it can't be measured. And so I'm thinking all of us in the room have probably worked with many, mixed modeling companies, and we've just seen that everything performs better in the context of some brand. We figure out what percent makes sense.
I was going to just add that I think that's the big game shift that has happened. Is mixed modeling has become much more at scale, and most people are now using it. Like 2 or 3 years ago, it was all last click, and my God, the difference between last click and mixed modeling is so different. So because now you actually see when you spend money on brand how it actually translates into other things that are more impactful for your brand.
Exactly, and finally, it's a measurement stack. It is inclusive of everything we're doing, because I think for a while we were measuring two ends of the funnel, and both of us claiming, full sales. So if you actually added it all up, massive attribution issues there. But I agree. That's been an opportunity for all of us too. And then again, great work from partners like yourselves, helping us understand kind of those consumer takeaways as well that are even, something that are larger than my sales impact.
Yeah, and I think that, as we move into this AI world that we all know is coming, it's only accelerating every day. I think authenticity and that human connection is going to even accelerate even further between brand and consumer. And we were having a meeting yesterday with one of our clients that has, worked with us for quite a while. And we were talking about all the differentiation from a technical perspective. Oh, we have this nonprofit data, we have this, we have that, and that. And they said your differentiation also, though, is the emotion. Like you are able to connect the emotion with our consumer in a way that they feel that accountability. And that's not a place that we see a lot of partners solely focusing on, because at the end of the day, our North Star is to align brand values with consumer values better than anybody else in the industry, because we know that that's what's going to move them as we move into this artificial world where it's even hard to tell what's true and what's not. That is going to become these underlying currents of things that are really important to our society. And so brands will have to be able to speak to that.
I think that's a great segue, just because as this continues to evolve, we're seeing the traditional silos between kind of branding and performance start to break down. We're not really trying to think about media investment and strategy by such clear buckets, but rather that full relationship and journey that the consumer moves through. So David, I know you have a lot of experience on this front. How do you kind of advise and help clients rethink how they look at the traditional silos and measure efficacy?
I think so often we're so used to seeing results measured in silo. You get a brand health study or you see a sales lift. Something that we've been proud to do at Collective is to build models that allow us to understand the relationship and how you sequence that. We have clients asking us all the time, hey, everyday low prices, I've been measuring that quarterly for 5 years. What does that do for me? Does an increase in 2 points in everyday low prices translate into a reduced cost per transaction. And being able to build models that can measure that and track that over time and project that out to outcomes at an audience level has been a game changer for us.
For the other panelists, I mean, do you think that the continued advancement of measurement, will that really just support our ability to continue to rethink where brand values really sit in the funnel? We know that they've kind of traditionally been viewed, like you said, Chad, as cause marketing. It's kind of off to the side, tangential. Like, how can this really help brand values become the center of the brand strategy?
I mean, one of the things that we're seeing that's super interesting, and we've not really publicly made a statement on this because it's a little too early in my opinion, I want more data, but it's that we're seeing that we're hitting those top of the funnel metrics and the bottom of the funnel metrics in the same campaign. And so it's really interesting to think about, to your point, like values being that key between, and you've seen it, I don't know if you're comfortable with me sharing some of the stuff, like with NBA where, brand awareness doubled, but then also tune-ins, we were one of the top performers. And that was like the whole point of the campaign. It's like not cause marketing. It's like, hey, we want to get more eyeballs watching the game, that sort of thing. Or I think that's what you say in sports. I'm not really an expert. But
That sounded good.
That's all right. I think I did all right. But, we're seeing that across the board, even in QSR, where like store visitation, because a lot of our clients, a lot of people pay in cash, we're seeing that the incremental visit lift is anywhere from 20% to 35% of people coming in with new customers. So it's like looking at that, seeing these early, really positive signs and wondering how we continue to utilize that value signal to achieve both metrics.
I think that's a great example, and I want to ask the rest of the panelists the same. Do you have any anecdotes of a time when rethinking the traditional kind of buckets or balance between branding and performance really helped you deliver a great result, or kind of challenged your even ideas of where different tactics traditionally sit?
So, I'll go back to gaming and Gen Zs for a second. So we sell gaming machines. And it's a huge, obviously a huge part of the TAM for us in terms of where the opportunity lies. Now, during COVID, when Gen Zs were having a real difficult time, gaming was one of the things that saved them. And many of them, as you probably know, had a lot of issues with mental health and other problems. The online community, as an example, was their one place where they found their friends and other people that they could connect with. So we went ahead and created a community, several years ago, 5 years ago, thinking that we needed to provide a space for gamers in general, because that's what they want, a place where they can have a conversation, but the brand just facilitates that conversation without trying to interrupt them. Now, if you look at the ROI on that, I mean, it's very difficult. It's a 5-year project. So you gotta say, hey, this is what we stand for. It's important for our customers. How do we make sure that we are facilitating that conversation? Leave the ROI aside for a second and see if you can genuinely get them engaged. So I did not put a single dollar into driving my community activation, as an example. So I did not put any money to say, hey, go to my community, here's a sweepstake. If you go there, we'll give you something. When we started, it was all organic. So to me, I said, look, if you organically cannot grow the community, it means you've failed. Because you're not saying anything meaningful. Right. The customers don't think you're being genuine. So it took us a long time, 5 years, to get from 0 to 200,000 customers, 200,000 membership. And from 200,000 to 1 million happened in like a year and a half. My sense is that we are going to go from 1 million to 10 million in the next 3 years. The point is, when you really not prostitute yourself, and stand true to your brand value, and you say, look, we are going to do something really genuine, and we're going to try and drive that connection, however hard it is, then I think you start seeing the benefit. But the biggest thing is you need believers. You need somebody in your organization that's saying, I will take the hit for the money I'm spending if I don't see the return. And that's a big deal, because CFOs run the place and they say, oh, what are you talking about? We don't even know if you're going to be here next year. So, I mean, it takes a lot of courage for you to say, we believe in it, we're going to drive it that way, We are not going to be the main conversation starter. We're going to let the community drive the conversation. And what we have seen is some of the most amazing and authentic things come out of the community where they are telling us, hey, you need to think about the product this way. You need to think about our customers. This is really top of mind for us. So I think it's a game changer when you are clear on what you stand for and how you want your customers to react with you.
I think so often we talk about brand values as being at the very top, and then we jump straight to the bottom, but maybe we should be talking about the middle a little bit more. Work with an iconic brand, and they're launching a new product this upcoming year, and it's one of the most competitive segments in the industry they work in. There's 25 different competitors. The brand values that we celebrate in media, in creative, in influencers, in content is one of the bets that we're making to help consumers differentiate when they're trying to make a decision on which brand, which product they want to go through. When we launch this new product, if we can help them differentiate on the values and what they stood for over 100 years, this is one of the ways that working with clients we can drive better outcomes in this launch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. The mid-funnel is a big area of focus for so many of our clients. It's a creative challenge, certainly. And that's one of the first reasons, if a client isn't supporting it, they just, can't afford the production. But having a full funnel creative strategy, to your point, I mean, every asset's got to drive home whatever, the brand positioning is. An example for Ulta Beauty, a brand positioning that just flexes so well from high to low. They're actually back to using a tagline that was initially created in 2018, "The possibilities are beautiful." But it came from some brilliant brand work done by McCann, a partner agency with us. But it was about, they said that Ulta Beauty really is about removing limitations, which at the sort of like most tactical level was about you didn't have to go into a mall. You could just pull up right in front, walk in. They removed limitations of having to go to 2 different stores for mass versus prestige beauty products. But then when you move up the funnel, they just talked about removing limitations of expectations of who makeup is for. Men can wear makeup. Moving even higher up, there was a key piece of research that showed that most women, something like 79% of women, believe there's a beauty standard, and it's not them. Wow. It's heartbreaking. But that really fueled an entire brand campaign called The Possibilities Are Beautiful that was able to flex whether we were high, mid, or bottom of the funnel in terms of showing every day how a brand could actually help you remove limitations from price to how I feel about myself and my esteem.
I find that so fascinating. It's something that I haven't really thought about, how values speak at certain parts of where you are in the consumer journey. So I think that's so smart. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say the downside that we have seen, and this is anecdotal, right? If I look at, so we've been running performance marketing for a very long time, at least in the e-commerce space, and then we have a very strong brand layer, right? What happens when you don't have that mid-funnel story is it translates into poor margins. Your performance marketing tries to over-index on pricing. So you try to work on discounting to try and close. So you drive all of the bad behaviors. You take away premium from your brand. It is devastating to a brand, and you don't realize this because it happens slowly. So if I look at the trend for the last 5 years as an example, you see slowly your margins are coming down. And you keep asking the question, is this a product assortment issue? Should I be selling more premium? No. You've forgotten to tell the story, and because of that, you're using the price lever much, much more. And over a period of time, that's the only lever that works. And that's why that mid-funnel conversation is so important for brands.
I love that example because it gives a really practical way to think about the trade-off. And I think that's my biggest thought hearing each of you speak, is that this is something that's so critical, but it takes time, it takes patience, it takes kind of believing in the ultimate impact with maybe not necessarily being able to measure it finitely from the get-go. So maybe one kind of wrap-up question for each of you is, how can we really influence change over the next year? How can we practically explain things like the importance of the mid-funnel or show the real impact of the possibilities are beautiful? How can we get that kind of investment in the real impact of brand values and make sure that they translate across the funnel?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it earlier. You've got to be brave and confident, and you've got to set expectations. It's hard for clients, if you talk about values-based marketing in particular. I mean, we've had clients, they're afraid to stand for something, right? And it's like, well, I'm going to alienate 50% no matter what I say. It's like, well, you'll be relevant to 0% if you don't take a stand for something, right? So, but it can be tricky. So we've had clients that are, they've started in the middle of the country and kind of cater to, one type of mindset. And they're like, how can I sort of like get closer to the edge, like be a little, more positioned better, with the coastal audience. And we have brands that are coastal, and they're thinking, how can I appeal more to Middle America? So it is a tricky thing for clients, and I think one of our biggest jobs is just to help them understand, first of all, the imperative, like you've got to stand for something. If you don't, you'll be relevant to nobody. But then to have the confidence and the persistence and the patience to measure accurately and set expectations, so you have the time to prove that the values are, because we've all seen it, right? Performance marketing works better in the presence of a brand.
Well, I think it's also like, what 50% are you alienating? Like, the one thing that came out very strongly in the research across the board was Gen Z, millennial, multicultural, affluent, like heavily over-index. And there was even really interesting data around conservative people. I mean, let's all be honest. The Bud Light movement was a conservative movement. But when it's a liberal thing, it's woke. And so it's like, things are happening in all aspects of groups that are doing it. They just call it different things. But going back to your point, it's like saying, okay, I'm alienating 50% of baby boomers and maybe these groups that may not be my primary customer. So do I really care? You know what I mean? Long term, because I need to be growing my market share. And if you want to grow your market share, those groups are the one that really respond to this and are looking for this.
I think something that comes to mind for us as a data and analytics person, I'd be remiss if I didn't throw out a tool or something like that. Social listening's been around for a long time. With our teams, we built AI-driven tools that can not only scrape the comments, but actually scrape the content, the videos, the things that influencers are posting themselves, and using that as a way to understand what's going on in the environment, what are consumers saying, what are consumers caring most about, and then humanizing that, not just making it an AI black box kind of thing, but really taking the time to sit down, work with the teams, unpack how is the speed of the consumer evolving over time, and how can we work with our brands to connect that, is one way we can take, AI, data, tools, and all these hippity-hop things, but connect it into something that matters most to the brands.
And that's where I think the real change has to start, is being able to show the impact. Any more thoughts?
So for us, I mean, I'm actually just going back to the drawing board. So we spend 80% of the money at the top, 20% at the bottom. I'm actually taking money into the middle and redefining exactly what we need to do. Now, what you said is absolutely right, because the middle is tricky, because there is a chance that it may not resonate the first time. So you need to really figure out how you measure things through your MMM to be able to say, does it land, does it work? That's one. The second one is psychographic segmentation. I think and psychographic segmentation and testing at scale. And there are ways of doing this where you say, look, 50% of the customers that you alienate, you need to know not to go after them. So every conversation that you have is, the millennial audience is 70 million people. We are going to start targeting lookalike bullshit. And and the reality is that 70 million people, you're going to piss off 50% of the people if the message doesn't land. So the first thing you have to do is to figure out which 50% you want to avoid. You don't want to go after everybody. And this is something that I think marketers don't think about enough, in my opinion. And so what happens? You acquire a bunch of customers and 50% of them never buy. So your cost of acquisition doubles automatically. So the first exercise should be, how do I remove the 50% that I know is not going to resonate with my brand? How do I take them out? Have my creatives tuned based on psychographic testing to exactly know this might land. There's an 80% chance it's going to land. And then continue to test and figure out how to get that message land with that group. And that takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of structure. It takes a lot of people saying no to a lot of things. But then you're very deliberate in terms of how you're going. So I actually started the journey 6 months ago. It's going to take me another 6 months to even get a sense of like where I am, because the MMO readouts happen every 3-4 months, right, after the fact. So it takes you 6 months to really understand, is it working or not? So you really need to think long term. You need to really be committed to the strategy. And you say, like, if it doesn't work the first time, that second time or the third time, you need to continue staying the course, because it will eventually work. And when it works, it's a beautiful thing. And that's really what we want. That's real marketing, in my opinion.
Can I add one thing to that, too? One of the other interesting things that we got in the research is that only 15% of the respondents of the 2,200 consumers in the U.S. said that if a brand makes a mistake, so like the number one thing we hear from is, what if I get backlash? Or what if I do something wrong? but only 15% of people said, I will walk away from a brand and never come back. Most everybody was like, I am willing to be forgiving if they take certain steps. And so I think this fear that, you are going to alienate people in a way that they can't even become your future consumer if a strategy changes is not really the reality. It's just that 15% tends to be the loudest voices.
That's a very powerful insight, and it, I think, parlays well into the last question that I'll ask, which is that this is a very kind of complicated conversation with the amount of directions it can go. What would each of your advice be to a brand who's looking to kind of get started, quote unquote, of understanding, okay, how do I start crafting this path of being very clear about what matters to me and putting in the investment and measuring it? You just gave an excellent example, I think, of how you're doing exactly that. But any more thoughts?
You can't be all things to all people. Like, brands have to get over this, oh, I'm going to make people mad or I'm going to alienate. You're always going to alienate people. And I think that it isn't, like, the example I always use, I have a friend, I was actually showing her the research in Arkansas last month when we got it back, I was home. And it showed that only 10% of consumers today say that values doesn't come into play in any part of their decision making. And she was like, that's stupid. That's not real. And I go, here's me. Well, why do you think that? Because this is someone that doesn't know our industry or anything. And I was just like really curious. She goes, I don't shop based on values. I'm a liberal person. I don't go eat at Chick-fil-A every day. I go, right. She goes, she said, I go to Chick-fil-A sometimes and eat, and they don't align with my values. I go, but do you go all the time? And she goes, no, because I feel bad, so I'll go only like once or twice a year. And I go, so you're shopping on values, but it's just that at certain points, convenience and price overtake, and it happens. I'll admit it. I like that chicken sandwich. Like it happens for me too. And I think the other thing that I'll say is, yesterday we had a roundtable with a couple of CMOs, and the question was, what's your favorite brand that lives to their values? And I go, for me, this may be what people are not going to think, but it is Chick-fil-A. Like, it is in everything of their process, the way they speak to their customers, the fact that they close on Sunday. Like, it would be very easy for them to be like, hey, I can increase my profit, but they don't do it because they live to their, I don't personally agree with it as a queer person, but I respect the fact that they stay true to who they are. And I think they're a good example of that.
Yeah, and I love the point about use the power of media to be pointed with your messages, right? We can decide who's going to hear about particular aspects of our values. There are safe places in mass media sometimes too, but the men with makeup, right? RuPaul's Drag Race, great, it's on TV, but then I don't have to have that, spread across store windows necessarily, although we have. And then you have to, again, be brave, prepare your clients, to take a stand and stand for the right thing. So we did get feedback, from some of the imagery when people, didn't resonate with, and it's like, okay, that's thank you for your comment, but we are committed to diversity and, removing limitations for everybody. So having that confidence to stand by it.
I would say working with our brands, don't buy the hype. It's so easy to just jump in and try to be part of the conversation, but if you don't know what you're truly standing for, you can make some mistakes. So take the time to understand, discover what you're really trying to be about. There's a brand that has been discussed here today that we work with that is very strong about what they believe, and sometimes that means doing less because they and the product sells itself, and when you don't buy the hype and you just stay true to who you are, like, sometimes that's what people respect the most.
So we didn't talk about this, and this probably is another panel, but I'll just throw one more thing for you guys to consider, is bias in marketing. So as marketeers, we are biased people. And I think that there is a lot of that goes into how we think about campaigns, how we think about customers, how we think about everything. And so our own predisposition stops us from doing what is right because we assume that we know. So I would say, take a point of view on who your customer really is. Mm-hmm. Sit down and really rethink who your customer is and what really influences them. You would be amazed and shocked at the same time that a lot of things that you think is your customer and what they consider value is actually not true. So removing that bias, I think, is eye-opening. And we went through that exercise trying to understand who really our customer is and what they consider value. And it's like divergent to our marketing values. And sometimes those things will save you a lot of money and grief down the line.
I think that's an amazing insight to end with, words to live by as well. Assume that you don't know. So thank you for that. Thank you to our panelists. I thought it was an excellent discussion. Thank you, Givesley, for hosting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A more professional one.
I'm just going to take a small step forward if that's okay. That's brilliant. Amazing. Oh, you legend. Here we go, everyone. Let's show me.
I love the support.
Ah, yeah, you're rock stars, right? Rock stars in marketing. All right, team. Amazing. I love it. Beautiful. Perfect. Thank you so much.
It's great to see you.
I actually did this help.
Please do. I would love to like meet you. Just because I lead a marketing team and I love everybody sharing the outskirts.
Yeah.
It was great to meet you.
Thank you all.
Hopefully, fun.
It was great.